Welcome to the podcast Life After Addiction and Indictment. I'm your host, Steve Cloward, and I spent most of the last decade and well over $100,000 on coaches, consultants, masterminds, and events trying to figure out how to reclaim my life again. On this podcast, I'm going to share the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the hacks that allowed me to forgive myself so that I could reclaim my life again. I'll be interviewing experts in mindset, leadership, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, branding, and so much more. I'm glad you're here. Sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Let's go! This is Life After Addiction and Indictment.
Welcome to Life After Addiction and Indictment. I appreciate you coming back. If this is your first time, if you like what you hear, please share it with, family and friends, anybody that you might feel might benefit. And if you'd please go leave us a 5-star review over on Apple, would appreciate that as well. Today, I've got a incredible woman. I've read a lot about her past. Her story is incredible. And I just want to welcome Ann Hince to the show today. Thanks for your time, Ann.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you taking some time out. I know you're busy, and so thank you for being here. As we were talking before the show, as I had read some stuff about your story and also some of the things that you're, involved in, kind of where your focus is and stuff, I'd like to, start with your story, but also, one of the things that we were talking about before that is really something that I've gained a lot more interest in over, particularly the past couple of years, because I grew up in a religion. In the past, 3 years or so, I've kind of woken up to that stuff, and so I've been more on a spiritual journey. Because I think that personally, that to me is what it's about. Religion, I'm not saying it's wrong. I believe there's a lot of good things in many of them, but there's a lot of things that aren't so good in my opinion. So if, we can talk about that kind of stuff after, but, I'd love to have you share your story about, I can't remember what age, but you were very young. Was it 5 or 7, something like that, when you found your mother dead?
That was 19, but I had plenty 19? Of trauma before that. Yeah.
Wow.
I was born with my right foot up against my right shin. So the first few weeks of life were physical therapy.
Oh my.
And then I was handed over for adoption into a family that had just suffered a trauma because they had adopted another little boy. So he was around 2. Then they adopted another little girl and they raised her for 6 months. And at that time in England, I don't know if it's changed, but at that time, the birth mother could change her mind up to 6 months. And at 6 months,
brutal.
That birth mother changed her mind. So they had to hand this little girl back. And I was the replacement into the family for that loss.
Oh, wow. Because I have 5 kids, 4 boys, biological. Our daughter we adopted, walked right out of the hospital with her. But I can't imagine having that happen. I mean, talking about hell.
Yes, it must have been awful. And then, whether they could connect with me right away, right? Because they would be concerned that my birth mother was going to do the same thing. Plus the trauma that my brother experienced, right? Because he had a little sister. Yeah. Wow. So that was the beginning. But my birth mother didn't change her mind. And at 6 months old, we started moving around the world. My dad worked for an international company. So we moved first to Barbados and then we moved to Sierra Leone in West Africa.
Oh, wow.
And while we were there, we had a house fire. And I was the one who woke up in the morning and saw the flames coming in through my bedroom wall. So there was another trauma.
Wow.
My dad already had anger issues, so that was going along this whole time. And then we moved to Hong Kong next. And while we were in Hong Kong, we were sent to boarding school in England. My brother was sent first, and then I was sent next. And I was sent to his school, which was a boys' boarding school. So really? I was I was the only girl boarder in that first year, the boys' boarding school. And I was teased mercilessly by these boys.
What age were you?
That was 9 through 11.
Oh, man.
Not a good time. And then after that, I went to a girls' boarding school and, things changed. It was the other side. But in those teenage years, both my parents became alcoholics. So, that was difficult to work through, obviously. And when I was 19, I woke up one morning and found my mother dead on the bathroom floor. So.
Oh, my goodness. I can't imagine what that was like. Did she basically, do you know what killed her? Was it alcoholism? body just give out, or?
She had throat and lung cancer from both smoking and drinking. She drank a bottle of sherry a day in those last few years, so kind of pickled herself, it felt like. You know. But it was actually one of the tumors in her throat burst. So it was a very sudden, even though we knew she had cancer, it was a very sudden death.
Geez, that's terrible.
And we didn't talk about things, you know, this is England. I don't know how different England is from America, but my family never talked about anything.
I think that's a kind of I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I think it's more of a family type thing. You know, you look at families who are very open, the simplest thing of saying I love you versus families that don't even, no one says that to each other, you know what I mean? Or
right. Yeah. I remember my mother saying it to me one time, and that was the first time I got an A in one of the big exams.
Oh, wow.
That was the only time I remember her hugging me too. So, you know, I'm sure she did when I was small, but yeah, we never talked about things. We only talked about her cancer one day, the day we were told about it, never mentioned it again. So that's what I was trained to do, right? We get programmed in childhood and we just do the same thing. So I just suppressed all these things and just carried on with life because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Right? That's our normal. We just continue to do our normal until something happens.
That's right.
So throughout my 20s and early 30s, I had a lot of digestive things. I know you've had a lot of those too. And I tried external things, right, to try and make myself feel better. I did cleanses and fasts and diet changes and everything. And things worked for maybe a week or two. And then it always seemed to revert back to how things were. So it wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I had a business altercation with a couple of other mothers at my boys' school. They told me I'd done something wrong. And I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. But my mind just started spinning over and over what they'd said and what I'd said and what had happened. And it was 3 days of not being able to sleep and not being able to get out of this mode that made me realize first that it's not normal. I don't think other people would react this intensely to something that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
But that's when I realized it felt a little bit like how I would react when my dad told me I'd done something wrong. So that was like the little opening that, oh, maybe there's something from childhood that's still affecting me to this day. And that's where everything changed.
So so you had that realization that something must be there. So then, what did you do? How did you address it?
Yeah, I didn't really know what to do at the time, but it was around then that I had a doctor's appointment, and he was a holistic physician. He was also a parent at my boys' school, so he kind of knew me. And he recognized that I was way more stressed than I should have been in the situation that I was in, which was a stay-at-home mother of 2 young boys. And he asked me what my stress level was on a scale of 0 through 10. And I said it was an 8. And then he asked me why. And it was that question that made me realize, it was finding my mother on the bathroom floor because the tears were still just under the surface. And so he happened to know this technique that's called EFT, which is short for Emotional Freedom Technique, or it's called tapping. Are you familiar with it? Okay, well, it's called tapping because we tap on specific places in our body as we're talking something through.
Okay.
And so he tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes. And I walked away from the appointment being able to tell the story in my mind for the first time without the tears there anymore.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that we hold those memories and those emotions physically in our body and that we can let them go, right? That was huge.
Oh, that is, because I think the majority of us do that, it's just to what level, and for whatever reasons, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of them, but, I also think that that's also what tends to lead to a lot of health issues. So were you still having your intestinal stuff issues or whatever?
I probably was at that point, but yeah, that was resolved along the way, right? So that's part of the journey. So what I did is I went home that day and I looked online to learn everything I could about this technique because it was given away for free by Gary Craig, who developed it. Of course, he wanted it out there so people could use it. And it's actually very simple to learn. It's very easy to learn and to do. You can learn it in 5 to 10 minutes.
Really?
It's a little bit deceptively powerful, right? It doesn't look like it's doing much, but
Right.
I really realized it was. And the way I realized it was because I wanted to try it out, right? I wasn't entirely convinced from that episode with the doctor, right? I'm an engineer, I was an engineer, software engineer, and I like to know things work before I spend time on them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try it out. And I had a 17-year-old cat at home at the time, and his kidneys were starting to fail. And we'd been told we had to give him a daily saline shot. Well, I don't like needles. And the first time I gave my shot, my hand was shaking so bad. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it every day. So I tapped about it. I tapped about my hand shaking. I tapped about my fear of hurting him. And I tapped about all my memories from all the injections I'd had because we moved around the world, right? I'd had a lot of injections. And the next day, when I gave him the shot, the needle just slid right in. All that fear that I'd been holding inside had totally gone. So that's when I realized two things. I realized it is deceptively powerful, right? It doesn't look like it's doing much, but it really is. And that's when I realized that the freedom that I was looking for was on the other side of that fear. And that's where I wanted to get. So that really showed me a roadmap almost of how to get there. I could see that it worked, and I could see that those emotions were just stored physically in the body. They were just energy that are stored in the body. And all I've got to do is find a way to let it go. And that's what EFT does. It lets that stored energy in the nervous system release out of the body.
That's crazy. How does it, like, so if you have like all these stories and, you know, whatever experiences that you've gone through, and like tapping like relieves you of everything pretty much, like.
Well, that's what I did. I started using it every day. Now, you know, we've got to be able to catch ourselves in the emotion in order to use it, right? So I would start noticing if I was frustrated during the day, then I'd tap about, I'm frustrated, right? This thing just happened and I'm frustrated. So I would tap and bring myself back to peaceful state. And then I'd carry on with my day.
I'm going to learn this tonight.
And over the weeks of just doing it daily like this, I recognized that I was becoming less reactionary and more peaceful. But I wanted more, right? I wanted it to happen more and faster. So that's what I did. I wrote down every memory, every emotional memory I could think of from my childhood and my whole life up to that point. So it was multiple sheets of paper. Yeah. And I tapped through one each night for about an hour to an hour and a half each night. And so what you do when you're tapping through like a story or a memory, like my mother's death, I had to do my mother's death more because as you work through one layer of emotions, more memories, more specifics about the event come to mind, right? You're opening up your subconscious mind. So I would do it again, right? There'd be more detail and then I'd do it again. So with a story, I'd just be telling the story as I tap through these specific points. So we tap through which are the ends of meridian systems. Okay. It's the tapping process itself that releases the energy stuck in the nervous system. So I talk through the story, right? I woke up in the morning, I really needed to pee, and I went to the bathroom.
You have to verbalize it out loud, or can you do it in your mind?
It's more powerful if you do it out loud.
I would think so, yeah.
You can just do it in your mind.
Okay.
So I'd tap through the story. If I felt any emotion at some point during the story, I'd stop there and just tap on the emotion. Okay, I was scared at this point. I was scared about, you know, having to make this phone call or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you continue, and then you go back to the beginning of the story and you do it again, and back to the beginning and do it again, until you can tell the whole story like you're reading from a book, right? All the emotion has gone, all the energy has gone out of the story of the event. And that's when you know that you've released it.
And it was, did you say it was Gary Craig that came up with this?
Yes. Right? Yeah. And he has some of his original videos are still out on YouTube, so you can just go and watch them. That's cool. It's very popular. It's been used a lot in the last 20 years, but it's changed, right? It's morphed over the years. It's morphed more towards the positive, right? People think we need to think positively, right? So they'll try and tap in the positive, but it's not the positive. It's the negative that's stored in the body. And that's where the power of EFT is.
Well, yeah, because even if you're trying to pull the positive in, but you've got all that negative in, you know, it seems to me that just logic would tell me it's going to be much harder unless you can release that negative, right?
It is. And getting to the negative takes finding the truth, right? If I'm trying to tap the positive in, like if I'm trying to say I'm really happy right now, but you're actually feeling really sad, tapping on I'm feeling happy right now isn't going to do a lot, because it's got to go down your truth. So if I'm saying I'm really sad right now, that is my actual truth. That's the neural pathway that's stored inside of me. And you got to find the exact wording, right, that fits what you're feeling. And that's when you accept it. The tapping allows you to accept it. And that's when the release happens.
It's fascinating. That's crazy. So you get instant relief when you learn this. I mean, and then you just continue on and you know.
Right. So I think my story kind of shows how far you can go with it, right? Because I got to the place, it expands our awareness, right? We use that term a lot these days, but people aren't really sure. At least I never was sure what awareness meant, because I wasn't aware when I started, right? I wasn't even aware of my emotions. You know, if someone asked me during the day, how are you feeling? I would always say, I'm fine, because I couldn't check inside and find out. But over the weeks and the months of doing this tapping, I became aware of my emotions during the day, of how I felt during the day. But then there's a deeper level of awareness, and that is the physical sensations underneath the emotions, right? When you see someone in the distance, right, you can tell by how they're holding themselves, whether they're sad or angry or happy, right? Because of that tension in their body. So we can become aware of where we're holding ourselves tense as well, right? If I'm frustrated, I can feel tension in my shoulders, maybe in my solar plexus, right? We can become aware of that. Now, I couldn't have done that at the beginning without
That's why my shoulders hurt today.
So you got that awareness of that pain there, right? But if you're feeling angry, right, you'll also have tension somewhere. So it's becoming aware of that. And once you become aware of that, then I started to use a different technique, because I was in a group at the time, and the guru kind of guy in the group would say every week, you don't have to meditate. It's all about feeling your feelings, which was great for me because I didn't want to meditate. But at the time, I didn't know what my feelings were. But that's when my EFT journey started, while I was in this group. So as the weeks went by, I became more and more aware of my feelings. So then one day I was doing the dishes at the kitchen sink, and I said, okay, I'm going to try and feel my feelings. What does that even mean? Right? Yeah. It sounds really simple. Okay, just feel your feelings. But it wasn't, because my feelings, the physical sensations, had been suppressed for so long, they didn't know how to be felt. They were used to being kept inside. So I would first catch myself thinking a thought that was negative, right? So for me, it would be a fearful thought normally. And then I would feel that fear. And the fear for me would normally be in my solar plexus. So I would focus on it. Now, if I took a deep breath or if I moved, I couldn't focus. I'd lose my focus on it. So what I realized I had to do was actually stop like a statue and stop in my breath. I didn't take a deep breath. I stopped in my breath when I felt that tension, and I would talk to it. So it's a little bit like EFT, but now we're kind of deeper. So I would say things like, okay, I can feel this fear right there in my solar plexus. I just want to feel you. I don't want to change you in any way. I just want to accept you and feel you. And at some point, I'd need to take a deep breath, and then I'd feel it again, and it would have shifted. It would have dissipated a little bit or moved somewhere else. Then I would think the same thought again, feel it again, do the same thing, and it would shift again. And I would do it over and over again with the same thought until there was no longer any emotion underneath it.
Wow. Once you do that, if you have that, so say whatever thought it was, and you went through that process and then got to the point you didn't feel it anymore, that doesn't make it so that thought maybe down the road wouldn't have any feelings to it, does it? I mean, you still could have the same experience. It's not like it creates it so that doesn't cause you that feeling anymore, does it?
You do it enough, yes, you can become imperturbable. That thought doesn't affect you anymore. Awesome. And the thoughts will disappear, because it got to the place where I opened my kitchen door one day and I said to myself, it feels like I'm living in a different reality, because my mind, which had been so busy and so negative and so judgmental, it was quiet and peaceful, and which was totally foreign to me I didn't even know that that could happen.
That's killer, because that's what I want.
And that's when I realized, right, that those voices in my head, right, the ones that were criticizing me or judging other people, had been my dad's words that I had been programmed with in childhood.
Wow.
And I just replayed them over and over, but I couldn't see that until they were gone.
Interesting.
And then I could see it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So is it, as you do that, it sounds like there's something that takes place that almost reprograms like either neural pathways or your subconscious or something. Is that even close to what's happening?
It's opening up the subconscious, and I think it's removing some of that
program
negative, right? It's removing the negative programming. It's not so much necessarily putting the positive in there. The positive arises naturally.
I was going to say, if you can remove that negative, you'd think the other would just kind of come about.
It is, right? Because let's go through the next step and come back to that. Okay, if you remember that. Okay, so I just kept doing this more and more every day now instead of the tapping. And so in the evenings, when I used to do the tapping for an hour to an hour and a half, now I would lay on the sofa and I would bring more collective traumas to mind. Something like 9/11, right? We all have our own personal experience of that event. So I would bring that memory to mind and just feel all those emotions and those sensations and just allow them to be felt, and they would dissipate. And I would just do this over and over, and it felt really good, right? Because I'm releasing that burden that we've been carrying, or I've been carrying all those years. So that was kind of the second step that I talk about in my book. So I'm just giving you the steps. Then I moved on to this next phase. So at some point during that process, I noticed I could keep my awareness inside my body after the tension had dissipated. So this is kind of the weird part, right? I'd never heard of this before. So imagine you have a toothache or a stomach ache, but you can pinpoint, you can feel where that pain is coming from. But once the pain is dissipated, you can't put your awareness back on that tooth or in the stomach quite the same way because there's nothing calling your attention to it anymore.
Right.
Right. I found that I could put my awareness back inside. And this was all new to me. So I started playing with it. I'd done it once and I found I could do it again. And then, now what? So I started playing and I started moving my awareness around inside. And I noticed that I could find where there was tension inside or no tension. So I would find a place with tension. I would focus on it, right? Hold my awareness on it, just allow it to be felt, and it would shift a little bit. So then I would do it again and again and again. So now I'm doing at a deeper level what I was doing with the feelings, and the EFT. But now I'm inside the body. So I would move around and just release tension. And it took many, many months, but eventually I was able to put my awareness inside my head. And that was huge. The biggest difference there, which sounds really weird to say, but it was because I was close to my ears. So when I would release tension, I could actually hear something release. I could hear, it sounded like old fabric ripping, and it felt like old fabric ripping. And that's when I did research and realized it's actually a connection or an adhesion in the connective tissue that was releasing.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was to me too, because it was scary.
It's not crazy to me, but
at that point it was scary, right? I didn't know what I was doing. That's why I did the research. But when I put my awareness inside my head, there was so much pain and tension. The forces pulling my bones out of alignment was just incredible. And I had no idea, right? For the first 50 years of my life, I had no idea that pain and tension lived inside my head. And I think it was there from being born with my foot up against my shin and my whole body was twisted. So it just showed to me how much tension we store inside from our past that we are not aware of, right? We don't know how much it's affecting us because we don't know it's there until we do, right? Because I'd done all this work, and it wasn't until I was ready to put my awareness inside my head that I became aware of it. But then I had the tool, right? I had the technique. So I just felt it, released it, felt it, released it, and got to the point that I could actually feel my skull bones relax. I didn't know what was happening at the time. It just felt really good, right? A really deep relaxation. Which is why last year it was so nice to get the x-rays taken and actually see that my eye sockets have aligned and my jaw was way off to the side. It's much more centered now. And my neck is straighter than it's ever been in my life because I've had scoliosis my whole life.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I've grown 1/2 inch at the age of 55.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, I'm a big believer, whatever techniques are techniques, because I believe that the body we can do so much more than we even comprehend, or most of us can even think, and I think it's something that is starting to come to light more and more. And I don't know the mainstream's the right word for it, but there's a lot more awareness to those types of things, whether it's reawakening to spirituality, or whatever. It's just, something like what you're talking about is something like, I believe in it 100%. Like, to me, it's not crazy. It might be strange when you talk about that ripping or feeling it, but I certainly believe it, because I just believe that we can do incredible things if we will put in the effort, because whatever people want to call their creator, I call him God, but, we've got abilities that are crazy, and
right. And I never knew this was possible. So let's go to a couple of those things. Let's go back to we talked about the light a little bit, or the positive. So I can sense inside, right? So I can sense that there's darkness or there's light. Once you let go of the darkness or the tension or the dis-ease or the shadow, once we let that go, it's light underneath it. So to me, the light is already there, and that's part of the enlightenment process, right? We're releasing that burden, we're letting go of that darkness, and the light or the positive is already underneath.
Wow. That's amazing.
And then let's go to the spiritual part, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that I realized along this way is because I'm looking from somewhere inside to somewhere else inside. If I'm doing that, I cannot be my body, right? I have to be inhabiting my body, right? Okay. So we're definitely a soul inhabiting a physical body. We're not the body itself. Right. So that was really fun to realize, to understand. And what I think that the spiritual connections I've worked out is that I do believe that we come in through possibly the pineal gland. I'm looking from somewhere in the center of my head. It could be the pineal gland. And the soul gets tied into the body through our history, through the adhesions in the connective tissue that we create or we hold on to using the old beliefs or thoughts we've replayed over and over again, that's what creates the adhesions in the body. And that distorts the signal that we pick up from spirit. That's how our ego manifests. And as we release our past and all those traumas and negative beliefs, we release that tension in the connective tissue, and then we tune into spirit more easily.
Wow. I definitely believe that. So, well, let's talk about that pineal gland. A lot of people, I don't think, it's not talked about enough. And I think that I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but there's a lot of things I believe they're done to make it so that it doesn't function the way that it can. Whether it's things we intend, just living life, frankly, and a lot of the garbage that we put in us affects it, along with a lot of other things that I believe take place. But maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Like, I look at it as the pineal gland gets like calcified. Do you know of any ways to, well, maybe your techniques you're just talking about will do some of this stuff, that would help, I guess, tap into the pineal gland easier, deeper, better? I mean, because I know I struggle with that. And it's something, I don't know if people understand what that, I believe that is truly what helps, does connect us to God, to spirit, whatever,
I definitely did some things along the way. I don't remember the exact things I did, but I did do some of those things. But at the same time, where I am now, I realized that a lot of the people who were on those or talking about the pineal gland, like on the internet and such, where they're talking about focusing on a place between your eyes or whatever, that is not that. It's really difficult to put in words. All that does is free up this one place. But it's our whole body that needs to be freed up.
Right.
Right. So doing the steps that I've done has freed it up over many places in
that
my
would almost be
body.
the last place that you get to, in a sense, maybe.
Well, it's one of the places, but to me, that does not have as much tension as many other places inside. For me, the most tension is in the cheeks, the cheekbones, where we create our facial expressions, right? That's where we store so much tension inside of our face. So to me, working on that is way more effective than working where the symbol of the third eye is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is such, to me, it's such a, I mean, it's a subject you can talk about for days and days, and it's very deep too. I mean, but it's fascinating because of what the possibilities are, right? I mean, you're a living proof of, what you've been able to do, and there's no doubt I should use some more, because my body's always tense.
Well, if you have physical expression of stored dis-ease, right?
Yeah.
Then it's already so big, it's manifested so much that you can feel it physically. Then yes, there is density to it, so you can work on that. So you can work on that with EFT at many levels. There's the physical level, right? So you could tap using EFT on how it feels, right? My shoulders feel really tense, they feel really tight, they hurt, right? You can tap on those aspects, but you'd also want to tap on the history around it, right? When did your shoulders start hurting? Was it after some event that happened that was extremely stressful? In which case you'd also want to tap on those memories from those events until you can just talk through them and they just sound really calm, right? There's no emotion left in them, because that is also connected to the tension in your shoulders. Right. And then you've got multiple places throughout your body that have something that you want to tap on, right? You could tap on the digestive system. You could tap about the surgery, right? If you had surgeries, you could tap about those, right? Because all those emotions are stored in the body and are distorting your signal from spirit, right? So if you allow that to release, the tension to release, then you're going to tune into spirit more easily.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Well,
I actually believe it's freeing up the soul within the body, right? Which kind of makes sense from what I said. And I believe when the soul is comfortable in the body, it's likely to stay in the body longer.
Interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah. So for those who want to live
somewhere
longer,
that's not comfortable,
right?
Because my shoulder issues comes and goes, and I think it has to do with posture and like when I'm sitting on my desk, so like, because I can't think of anything, but once again, maybe if I dive into this stuff a little, I will be able to associate something, because I honestly don't know.
But with EFT, you start right where you are. So you would start with what you just said. That was your belief. My belief is that my shoulders get tense because of my posture sitting at my desk. Yeah.
There we go. And
then you just work with that, and maybe some memory will come up as you're tapping on that. Maybe you got told off when you were a child for slouching or something, right? That's the opening up of the subconscious mind. Those memories start to bubble up, and then you can work on those.
Perfect. That made it easy, because there's times that there's certain things that I want to work on or think about, but yet I'm like, when you talk about as a child, we've all had certain things, and like there's certain situations, I'm not going to get into it here, but I will a little, but not in detail, that I talk about that I'm still very emotional about, but I believe they were resolved, but obviously they're not. Right.
If there's any emotions around them, yes, they're not resolved.
Yeah, I mean, emotion, like not crying, but I get emotional, you know what I mean? And so, there's still something there. I don't know what it is,
So all you would do is tap on what you do know.
And just, okay.
Right.
Perfect.
Because it will open up.
It'll just start to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe that all those tears that we never shed in childhood or whenever, that they're still inside, and they will come out once we access them.
Must be doing something right, because the older I get, the more I do shed them. When I talk about certain things or topics, it's interesting how, I don't care. Some people are bugged by that or think it's not tough. I think that's programming that's total, excuse my language, of bullshit that causes more grief than it does good, because why do we have to be tough? That's part of the problem,
Right. Well, that's us storing them inside.
100%.
Right? Yeah. And when we store them inside,
that way in society,
yeah, they affect us.
Yeah.
They cause dis-ease on the inside. So
Bingo.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to let them out.
Yep. That's cool. Well, this is great. So we'll talk about, I'm not looking for anything specific or anything too personal, but so as you've been able to free up and things like that, like what has it done for you from a spiritual connection,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's so many levels to talk about it from, but from that perspective, fun things happen. Serendipities happen all the time. And it's just, to me, that's just a sign that life is fun, right? Life can be fun.
Yeah.
But there's lots of other things that happen. I'm reading a lot of more spiritual texts. I'm reading old ancient writings that hopefully were Jesus's original writings or whatever, but I can understand them from a different point of view, right? Because
I'll bet.
Right. I believe what I'm doing is insight. It's the original meaning of the word insight, which is also used, and some other phrases are used, or he used them, that I can totally relate to, that 10, 15 years ago, there's no way I would have understood what was going on.
Yeah, that just hit a spot, because I'm reading a book right now called Word Magic, and so, because I believe there's so many layers, whether it's the Bible, Jesus' teachings, whatever, that I'm sure you're at a level, like you're saying, that you're able to understand in such a different way, and that's honestly, that tells me too that that I do have so much tension, because that's something that's always frustrated me growing up in a religion, whether it's reading the book that our religion has as well as the Bible. It's like, it frustrated the hell out of me my whole life, because it was like I just couldn't comprehend it in a way. Part of it's because my mind's everywhere, and I'm I've never been a book type smart person, but that's actually a lie. That's a story, because when I'm interested in things like this and a lot of other things over the last couple of years I have, then there's no problem with my attention, So I guess maybe I was just bored or whatever, but
right.
So anyway, so that's fascinating, because I think I can definitely see that.
Yeah. And one of the other things that I love about this journey is there is so much more depth to life than I ever knew was possible, right? So the deeper we know ourselves on the inside, the deeper we're able to see other things outside of ourselves, right? So it's easier to tell if someone is lying, right? Because if I know how I hold tension inside of myself, or how I breathe or don't breathe very deeply if I'm lying, I can see that in someone else. But you've got to have that depth of awareness, because those who don't have that depth of awareness, they're just hearing the words. They're not getting that nuance to someone, how they're talking, right? The depth to someone's voice.
Right.
So and I can see the interplay of energy in different things, that it just means there's so much more to life. There's so many people who are depressed these days, right? A lot of kids don't think, it's worth carrying on. But if you do this work, right, you get to enjoy a whole other depth to life that you never knew was possible before.
That's cool. And I think, what's going on in the world today and what has happened the last few years has put people in such a bad place,
Right.
We've got to do that personal inner work,
Right. And to me, it is personal, right?
Absolutely.
Taking responsibility for everything that happens. Yeah. So I work with the things that are happening now. I think they're coming up for a reason. They're coming up for us to feel them and to let them go, so that we don't have to replay them again, right? So I will now listen to the news and find inside of me where I'm feeling whatever it is I'm feeling, and feel it and let it go. So I work with the things that are happening now. I take full responsibility for everything that's happening around me.
Yep.
And that responsibility is to feel it and to let it go.
That's cool. Wow. Well, tell us a little bit about where's the name of your book and where people can find it.
Sure. It's called A Pathway to Insight. So I go through how I believe we get programmed in childhood And then we just kind of relive the same things over and over again until we learn how to let it go. So then I talk about the different steps, the 3 steps that I did, and anyone else can do too. And you can find it on Amazon, or you can ask your local bookstore to order it. And I have a YouTube channel that has a demonstration of EFT and a demonstration of feeling your feelings. So you can just go on there and learn how to do it and start doing it straight away.
I'll be going there tonight.
Cool.
I kind of have my routine every morning. I'm going to flip some of what I'm doing I'm going to start doing this EFT.
Nice.
So I'll be checking in with you in a month.
Great. Yeah.
For real.
That. Yeah.
I've done that with some other guests on some other topics, and it's good because it keeps me focused on it and keeps me accountable too.
Okay.
So I'll be putting it in my phone after this, and I'll be shooting you an email.
Perfect.
But I think it's cool, I appreciate you being here. I want to have you come back too, because this stuff is fascinating. This is what I'm interested in this stage of my life. This is what I want to develop, because it's like, I think it's one of the most important things. Like,
I believe we can change the world. I do absolutely believe
and
we can.
we need to start working together and start doing it, because it's just amazing how much crazy evil there is in this world, and we can change it if we step up and choose to.
Right. And that takes taking responsibility for us and letting go of how we feel about the craziness, right?
Yeah. For those of you listening, obviously the podcast is about overcoming challenges, struggles, so that you can free yourself to chase your dreams, whether that's entrepreneurship or whatever dream you might have. And this has been one of those episodes that I'm going to re-listen to many times, because I'm just right at that place in my life where I'm really starting to do a lot of this stuff, because I see the value in it. Not only can it help me in a lot of areas we've talked about in spirituality, but overall happiness, and having that tension freed is going to allow you to be much more, impactful at the things you do take on, whether it is a business, whatever it is, you're going to be at your best. So you can't help but have better results, in my opinion.
Absolutely. When you're at peace, you attract peace, right?
Yes.
If you're a peaceful person, you will attract peace. So the people around you will feel good as well.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, because we definitely attract people based on what we're putting out there, And so thank you for your time. And I'll have all the information to, get her book and your YouTube channel, all those different things in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to Ann, there'll be information there so that you can, and I would encourage you to do so. So thanks again, Ann, for being here, and I'll stay in touch, and definitely like to have you back in a couple of months if you'd be open to that.
That'd be fun. Thank you. I love this kind of conversation.
No, me too. It's a blast. So thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
If you're a small business owner and want to acquire 5-star Google reviews on autopilot, Backbone CRM is the platform for you. It is the review and messaging platform for local business. It not only will get you your reviews on autopilot, it makes it easier to convert leads, message customers, get paid all in one place. Not only that, but Backbone will allow you to convert more website visitors into leads and more sales conversations with web chat. You can manage your messages with a single inbox for text, Facebook message, Google messages, web chats, email, and a whole other slew of social platforms. It'll also give you the opportunity, if you miss a call, to automatically text back. So when you're away, Backbone will follow up via text so you never lose another customer. You can grow your audience and know where each and every lead is coming from. Backbone is the all-in-one place platform to get you more leads and customers and Google reviews on autopilot. In fact, one of our clients that we onboarded last week, the day after we launched their company with Backbone, they received 5-star Google reviews the very next day, and they all came in within a 25-minute span. They were blown away. So if you're not afraid of getting more customers to your business, check out the short demo video at www.backbonecrm.io. That's backbonecrm.io. Or you can give us a call at 888-668-5338.